So this is my homily for the 10th Sunday in Ordinary Time. This Sunday was a bit unique because we were celebrating the 50th anniversary of St. Mary's Catholic Church in Marysville. And so at some of the Masses I was preaching off of readings for the dedication, the anniversary of the dedication of the church. And then at other Masses I was preaching off the normal Sunday readings. And so in the midst of all of that, there was about 4 or 5 different homilies I think I gave. At one Mass, we were receiving a gentleman into the Catholic faith, receiving him into full communion. At another Mass, we had some first communions. So it was just kind of a sporadic weekend. So I'm not exactly sure what the message of my homily was, but I'll give it anyway. So the dedication of a church, so when we dedicate a church building, it's like we're saying, okay, this is God's house, but this is also our house. This is where we encounter the living God. This is where we should be able to find a deep sense of peace and mystery and just the presence of God in, obviously, the sacraments and God's presence there, just as God, but also in our neighbor. And it should be the safest place in the world for us. We should feel just totally at peace in our own church. And it's not that we ever own it. It's not like it's ours, like we're a little cult or a little clique, but it is home. And so I think that's what the dedication of a church does. It's like the blessing of a home, but much more so. And it's going to be a place where people are going to encounter God in such profound ways. I've been reading a book on on conversion stories of different people, and this is one conversion story, which is so wonderful, so beautiful. And so his name is Alphonse, okay? Just think of Alphonse. And he was Jewish, but kind of just culturally Jewish. He wasn't really practicing the Jewish faith or anything like that. He was part of a very wealthy family. His family was involved in banking, and he was set to inherit it and to be able to to continue the legacy of that in his family. He was getting ready to get married. He had met the love of his life. He was absolutely in love with this woman, and so life was just really, really good. Now, the thing is that he hated Catholics. I mean, he hated Catholics, which is with a passion. And this is during a time when the Jews and the Catholics didn't get along that well, and there was all kinds of reasons for tensions and perhaps even hatreds. But his brother, Alphonse's brother, converted to the Catholic faith and then eventually became a priest. And he just wrote off his brother. He just severed all ties with his brother. He said, "My brother's dead to me." He never talked to him. And so that's how it was with him, So, before he was going to get married, though, Alphonse decided to travel a little bit around Europe, and there was this one point in his journey he decided to stop in Rome, and he visited with some friends and family and people there in Rome that he knew, and there was this one particular gentleman that he knew really well, but he was Catholic, and Alphonse did not hesitate to. Of course, now as I'm recording my homily, they're using the trimmer right here. Sorry about the noise. Okay, so as he's going to visit his friend who's Catholic, he doesn't hesitate to just spew out all his hatred towards Catholicism. And his friend who's Catholic, who he's staying with and kind of visiting with in Rome, very patient with him. He just kind of takes it in. It's like, okay, whatever, And so as Alphonse is spewing all this bad stuff, he's just like, okay, yeah. Well, through the course of his visit, he eventually decides to. They're talking about faith and different things, and there's this moment where his friend who's Catholic says to him, "Now, I bet you can't wear a miraculous medal for 1 week." So the miraculous medal is the image of Our Lady. You'll often see Catholics wearing it, and so it has that image around. And he says, "I bet you can't wear it for 1 week." And in addition to that, also to be able to recite the Memorare prayer. That's Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection or implored thy help. So, etc., etc. So that's the prayer. So he said, you recite that prayer once a day for a week, and you wear the miraculous medal. All right? And Alphonse is like, yeah, I could do that. That's just stupid. It's superstitious. I can do it, no big deal. He was kind of goading him on. So Alphonse decides to do it. And so he starts wearing the medal. Well, it's not changing him. Nothing's changing about his behavior. So through the course of the week, his friend is like, all right, God, is this dumb, or should I have done this? Or, Well, the Catholic friend has another friend who's also Catholic, who's very pious, very holy. And so he goes to him and he says, look, I have this friend, Alphonse, who's just hates the Catholic faith almost as much as I hate that trimmer over there. Anyways, he hates the Catholic faith, and he says, I want you just to pray for him. Just pray for him during this week. Pray with all your might, right? So he says, sure, no problem, I'll pray for him. As the week progresses, this friend who was praying for Alphonse, the friend of the friend, right, who was praying for him, dies suddenly. Suddenly just died. And it was devastating to Alphonse's friend. He's like, I can't believe that happened. So he tells Alphonse, he says, look, my friend just died. I need to plan his funeral. I need to do all those things. And so I'm not going to be able to spend much time with you. But in the course of this, just to let you know, I'm going to have to do this. So Alphonse understood that. He understood his friend was very traumatized by his other friend dying. So as they're going through that, there's this one moment where Alphonse joins his friend at the church just because he's going there to set up funeral arrangements, just to set things up for the funeral. Well, Alphonse walks into the church and nobody else is there. Everybody's like in the office visiting with the priest or something. Well, he goes into the church. Now, Alphonse, remember, is the one who hates the Catholic faith. He goes into the church and he's just still his same old negative self. And he's like, oh, this church is just ugly. It's just, look at all this, it's just ugly. Well, before you know it, wham, he hits the floor. And he didn't trip. It was almost like he passed out, right? But he didn't pass out. Well, he's lying there for a while because nobody else is in the church. When his friend finally comes back in and sees him lying on the floor, and he gets him back up and he's like, what's going on? What's going on? And he said, I saw her. He's like, who'd you see? I saw Mary. I saw Mary. She appeared to me and she talked to me and she taught me everything. She taught me everything. And his friend is just dumbfounded and he's like, what are you talking about? He says, yes, I saw Mary. And she just taught me everything. So I have to become Catholic. I have to become Catholic. And it was only moments before he was just the same old self, just hating the Catholic faith. And he's like, no, you don't, I have to become Catholic now. And so finally the priest comes in, he starts talking. And now remember, this is going to be the church where his friend is going to have his funeral. The friend who was praying for Alphonse, right? And Mary appears to him in that church. Later that day, Alphonse was baptized. He became Catholic. Now, eventually, Alphonse would become a Catholic priest, just like his brother. And obviously, he rekindled his love and friendship for his brother. And the two of them, the two brothers, would go off and start a religious order in Jerusalem that would specialize or would have a charism ministering, there's a lot of distractions going on here, sorry. Ministering to the Jews in Jerusalem and helping those who wish to convert to the Catholic faith. So I love the story. Now, it happens in a church, right? It happens in a church, and it's the powerful conversion. And it's this way in which the Catholic faith was never meant just for us. It's always meant for us to be sharing it. And so how his friend is seeking and desiring that he can come to encounter God and thus add to, if you will, the family and to those who see the church building as the home. And just all these ways in which our faith is so external focused, is so much on loving others. Well, the gospel that we used for the dedication of the church was on Zacchaeus and his conversion. So you remember in Jericho that day, Jesus is walking through Jericho, and Zacchaeus, the tax collector and the rich man, he's really short, so he gets up in the tree to watch him go by, and Jesus says to him, Zacchaeus, let me go to your home and visit your home, right? And so he goes to his home, and immediately Zacchaeus' life is transformed. He says, I'm going to give half of everything I own to the poor. And if I've defrauded anybody, I'm going to give 4 times that to those whom I defrauded. This is an immediate conversion of Zacchaeus, right? And the people are scandalized. They're like, he went into the home of a sinner. Now, that's beautiful, because when we dedicate a church, we make it the home of a sinner, right? Of a bunch of sinners, because we're all sinners if we're really honest with each other. We're a bunch of sinners. And so in a sense, the church is the home of sinners. And it's just like Zacchaeus' home. But Jesus, what he says to Zacchaeus, he says, today salvation has come to this home. And so that's like a dedication. That's what, today salvation has come to our home, the church building, right? So I want to talk a little bit about this nature of home as the church building, but even more so just what home is, and how there's a messiness about home life, right? Usually we clean our homes when we're going to have a guest over, or somebody important is going to be over. But, the trimmer. All right, I got to focus. So we clean our homes to be nice. But when we are at work, when we were doing our homely stuff, when we're just being family in the home, life can be a little messy. The dinner table can be messy. The counters can be messy. And when you're baking, when you're cooking, you have dirty dishes, things are just messy. It doesn't look like a museum. Well, our churches should be in some ways that way too. Not messy as in like dirty and things left out, but they're being used. Our churches, if they're just a museum, if they're just for tourists to walk through, something's wrong. So they should be messy because they're being used. So it's just like, you think of the sacraments, when a baby's baptized. By the end of the baptism, the baby's all kind of messy, right? Their hair's all messed up because of the water, and the chrism has messed it all up. And the baby usually at some point has started crying because it's all kind of unusual for them. And so the baby looks a bit flustered from the whole thing. Well, it was God working. It was the sacrament happening, right? We had the ordination of 3 new priests in our diocese this last weekend, and it's kind of the same thing, they look a little messed up there because of all of the chrism and the putting on of the new garments, and it's just everything. There's a certain messiness to it in a beautiful way. It's they are now becoming something more, right? So in the ordination rite of priests, there's this point where they lie prostrate right in front of the altar, and they're the symbolism is, they are dying to their old self, kind of like Zacchaeus, who died to his old self, or Alphonse, who had this moment where he lied prostrate on the ground in this moment of apparition to Mary. And you have this transformation then that happens. And so these young men who were deacons and now are going to be priests, they're lying prostrate because they're dying to themselves. And then when they rise, they're going to be born again as priests for our family. And so it's no mistake, or it's no accident that we call priest father, because the father is one we have in the family. It's the one who rallies us together. It's the one who helps us to be a healthy family, to be united, hopefully, right? Okay? But there's certain messiness about how it all happens in a good way, in a beautiful way. And so the same is true. Our churches should be used. They should be used. It's like because we have so much things going on, that's a good thing. Okay, they're not a museum. I don't know if you've ever been to a dedication of a church, but it's really a great experience. So I've been to one, and it was in Vancouver, Washington. It was St. John the Evangelist, and so they built their new church. And Bishop Eusebio Elizondo came. He's one of our auxiliary bishops. He came to dedicate the church. Now, if you know Bishop Eusebio, he doesn't do anything small, right? Like, so when you dedicate a church, there's a point where you put chrism on the walls, right? In several distinct places. We usually mark them with candles, right? And so that's where the walls were chrismated. Well, he doesn't just use a little. Bishop Eusebio, he wipes the entire wall down with chrism. Now, through this ceremony, I'm the deacon. I wasn't yet a priest. I was the deacon, and I was standing next to the pastor through this whole thing. And well, there's this one moment where Bishop Eusebio, he's pouring the chrism onto the altar, right? He's consecrating the altar, and he doesn't just pour a little bit. He just completely douses it. I mean, it's just totally covered in chrism oil, and the oil begins just cascading off of the edge of the altar. And the pastor's like, he's like, oh no, because, you know, it's brand new carpeting and all this oil is spilling out onto the carpeting. And the altar at St. John's is a bit different. It's this giant monolithic stone slab, right? It's like the Old Testament style altars. And as the oil is cascading over the sides were not sealed. They're just kind of rough hewn stone. And so the oil begins to change the color of the stone, and the pastor's like, oh, it's ruined, this is horrible, you know. Now, as I'm there, I'm loving it. It's great. It's like, yes, mark the stone, because that stone is going to be put to work, right? We're going to be celebrating the Eucharist on that stone every day, or almost every day, and it's like, Jesus will be working here. This is our home now. And so I was loving it, and the poor pastor's having a heart attack. Well, when Eusebio went around back to the walls, when he went around marking the walls with the chrism, again, the walls are drywall, right? And the pastor's like, oh no, it's, you know, because he's thinking the oil's going to like stain the walls or something. Again, it seems so awesome. It's like, yes, there's a messiness to it, but it's like, this is going to be intrinsically different. This building will be like no other building in that area. This is the home of God, right? Well, one of the things, so every bishop has a ring as a sign of their authority, and the ring is obviously metal. And when Bishop Eusebio was anointing the walls, he was scraping his ring into the wall. And the pastor's like, oh no. But again, I was loving it because it left a metallic mark on the wall, and in the shape of a cross, and he just these huge crosses on the wall from his ring, and you just see them all around the church with the chrism and everything. It was fantastic. It was fantastically messy. It was home. It wasn't just going to be a beautiful building. It was going to be our home, where the messiness of the sacraments happen, where we as sinners gather there. And you think of all the sacraments, confession, where we can be reconciled to God, and the wedding, where two people become one, and just all these beautiful, beautiful things are going to happen because it's our home. It's where Jesus Christ is here with us. This is something very special about our churches. And people often say, well, it's not about the building, and I agree, it's not about the building. But buildings are important to us when they become God's home and our home together. And that's when we enter into it and we say, today salvation has come to this house. All right. God bless you. I'll see you next week.